Welcome to Suburban Warrior, the podcast that will impact, inspire, and empower you to transform your mindset and become the badass warrior that you are. I'm your host and fellow warrior, Chrissy Pfeiffer, former clinician and corporate marketing exec turned multi-passionate entrepreneur, performance and life coach, and mom to 4 not-so-little warriors. Each week, I will bring you honest conversations with inspiring guests to share their stories of resilience, optimism, success, and simple yet effective strategies so that you transform your thoughts and change your behavior to get the results you want in your life. You will be empowered to take action, warrior up, and believe in you. Let's do this. What's up, warriors? Welcome back to another episode of the Suburban Warrior Podcast. I'm your host, Chrissy Pfeiffer, and you guessed it, I am back this week with yet another Suburban Warrior here to share her journey with us. And I'm really thrilled about this week's topic, which is money, because I mean, who doesn't love to talk about money? And I know that I know how to make it and I know how to spend it. But beyond that, I have to admit that I'm a little lost. And I'm always in awe of the people who are in financial planning and who watch the markets and know about investments and that sort of thing, because it really is just so foreign to me, like it is for so many of us. But I know where my strengths are, and that is certainly not it. So today's guest is going to talk to us about the habits of the ultra wealthy, financial planning, as well as the constant journey to reaching for a higher self. So with that, let me introduce to you Kaitlyn Carlson. She is the founder and CEO of Theory Planning Partners, the first family office built exclusively for the top female entrepreneurs in America. After cutting her teeth in asset management, Kaitlyn spent the majority of her career at UBS Financial Services, where she developed more than 300 financial plans for clients with assets ranging from $500,000 to $1 billion. Subsequently, she became an advisor on a private wealth management team that managed over $600 million for a handful of families. And despite her success at UBS, Kaitlyn saw a gap in the market she felt compelled to address. Business owners, particularly women, needed holistic support earlier in their entrepreneurial journeys to optimize wealth creation. Theory Planning Partners is pioneering the space with a focus on getting more wealth into the hands of women. Outside of work, Kaitlyn is a spiritual seeker, ravenous to understand why we are here and how to forge a meaningful life. She resides in beautiful Marblehead, Massachusetts with her husband, Jake, their son, Russell, and affectionate dog, Bacchus.
Yes. Bacchus.
Yes.
Good
Great.
job.
Bacchus. I wanted to make sure I got that right. In her free time, she enjoys exercising, reading, traveling, and sampling new restaurants in and around Boston. That sounds awesome, Kaitlyn. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Chrissy. I think you have most of my life story now.
I know, that's it. Okay, let's wrap it up. We're done.
Nice to meet you.
That was a great bio. But as we all know, that's just like the surface of it, right? And there's so much that goes into how you got where you are, your career. And I know you have so much expertise to share with us about money. And I think it's really important because I do think like there's a lot of people out there that just aren't experts on money, right? We all know how to make it. We all know how to spend it. But beyond that, it's like the investing tips, tricks, this and that. And, you know, there's just so much, especially these days. So I love that you focus on women. I love that you focus on women entrepreneurs. And I'm really excited to hear how you ended up starting this business. So let's start with that. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your story.
Sure. So I don't often do this, but I'll go a little bit back to the beginning. So I was raised in the Boston area. And I think since I came out of the womb, I had a fundamental belief that women could do everything that men could do, which was reflected in my athletic career. I was an ice hockey player and
awesome. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, I was very competitive growing up, and there weren't many girls at all that were playing when I was growing up. But again, I always felt like, you know, this is a sport that I'm interested in and I'm going to find a way to make it. So I played with the boys until I was 15. And ultimately that set me on a journey to boarding school. And then ended up playing in college and actually won a national championship in ice hockey. And
amazing. That is so cool.
Thank you. I don't
That
talk
is
about
the
that.
true definition of following your passions, though. I love that.
Yes, definitely. And the relationship between having a long-term goal, setting a goal when you're 7 years old and achieving it when you're 19, and all of the hard work and discipline that comes with that. So that was a pretty defining part of my childhood. And I think because I had always been in a male dominated space with athletics, it was pretty natural for me to go into finance. But I was also very interested in psychology. I was a psychology major in college. And so when I came out of school, I went into asset management. I worked for a mutual fund company that was sold through financial advisors. And that's when I learned what financial advisors did. And once I learned about that career path, I thought, what a cool combination of my interests, both psychology, working with families and individuals, and then also finance, working with the money aspect of everything that their financial life involves. So I met my husband at my first job, and then we moved down to New Orleans for 4 years. And so when we made that move, I switched from asset management, which is a very narrow piece of wealth management, which is much broader. And so I moved into wealth management and got my certified financial planning designation. And so for those who don't know, becoming a certified financial planner, you go pretty deep into detail on investments, taxes, insurance, estate planning, charitable giving, basically everything that your financial life would encompass. And while I was going through my CFP program at UBS, I was also working alongside advisors and their clients. And so by the time I came out of my financial planning program, I had worked with over 300 clients, and a lot of them were business owners and entrepreneurs. And I loved that demographic. I loved how dynamic they were, particularly first generation business owners. They were visionaries and they were just really cool people to be around. Obviously, most of them had a pretty high risk tolerance.
Right. Absolutely.
And the whole reason why I even created Theory was because during that experience, I worked with a lot of business owners that were close to the end of their career, because wealth management, based on the way that you get paid based off of the liquid assets that you manage. So a lot of times I'd come in at the end of their career, and I often saw that business owners had missed a lot of wealth building opportunities that they could have utilized decades in advance. Now, for the ultra wealthy people, they didn't necessarily have to deal with those obstacles. But for the majority of small business owners in America, a lot of them get into their 50s and 60s and realize, oh, wait, what I would need to net from the sale of my business isn't going to be enough to support me for the rest of my life. Right. So that was the gap in the market that I saw, was if I could have educated this business owner in his or her 30s or 40s, they wouldn't be finding themselves exhausted and in this position in their 60s. And a lot of times it was pretty heartbreaking, because I'd say to them, you're not really in a position to walk away for another 5 to 7 years. And when you're 65, that seems like a really long time.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So that was the inspiration for starting Theory. I don't know that I ever saw myself becoming an entrepreneur. I actually thought when I went to UBS, I was going to spend my career there, but I had to deal with a lot of sexual harassment when I was at UBS. Starting with my very first week there, I was sexually harassed by a 68-year-old advisor. And this was before the Me Too movement. So It felt like it was just happening to me, and it was really scary. And I had never dealt with anything like that before. So I was 24 years old. I didn't know if I was going to get fired, what would happen if I spoke up, if there would be any sort of retaliation. But it was very exhausting. Fortunately, UBS did the right thing and they terminated that advisor, but I still had to deal with it over and over again in the industry. Ended up having to file 6 sexual harassment complaints in 3 years.
Oh my gosh.
And, the first one was very much to protect myself, but I started to notice that it was a systemic problem, and I started to speak up for other women in the office that I knew weren't in a position where they could leave their job, or there were younger women coming into the office and I felt the need to protect them. But ultimately it was so distracting from my actual job that I just needed to move on. So I went through a series of partnerships, always with men, and I went through 3 of them, and they all failed for different reasons. And my husband was the one who finally said to me, I think that you need to believe in yourself. And I think that you keep giving your power away. And that's something
Which
that
is what us women do,
yes,
unfortunately, right?
He's like, you have so many letters behind your name. Like, you have all these accreditations. Why do you feel like you need a man to, partner with? So kind of ironic, but my husband was the one who really encouraged me to go out on my own. And I knew that I wanted to work with business owners. It took me a little bit of time to really get the confidence that I could specialize in female business owners. But since I've done that, I haven't looked back.
Wow, that's amazing. And I want to go back and thank you for being so vulnerable and authentic and sharing that story with us about the sexual harassment, because, you're a lot younger than I am, but I think any woman I really think any woman who has been in the corporate world, especially a male dominated corporate world, which most of them were, and still are, but really were when I was in the corporate world, has these stories. And they are, things that we sort of accepted as behavior because what were we going to do about it, kind of thing. Right. And especially back in the late 90s, and early 2000s when I was in the corporate world. So I remember that feeling, and the whole Me Too, it's brought it so much more to the surface that we can talk about it, not be fearful that people are going to judge us, that we've done something wrong, not accept it for just it's just how it is anymore. So thank you for sharing that with us, because I think so many women have experienced it, and, just we sort of brush under the rug and we don't talk about it. So thanks for sharing that detail with us. And it is very difficult in all these male dominated industries. I mean, I was in medical device sales, which was extremely male dominated, especially because it was orthopedics. And I was the only female. Then I went into the corporate world where, again, I was in meetings and I was the only female. And it's very difficult, no matter how strong of a woman you are, to, raise a family, to be the only woman in the room when all these men are just staring at you like you have 4 heads. So I get why you wanted to make that transition, and good for you, because obviously your strengths are just going to benefit other entrepreneurs. And now you get to do it on your terms, which is the best thing ever.
It's so true. I started my company and got pregnant in the same month.
See, there you go. Giving birth to 2 different things, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So tell us, for those of us out there who, I know you work with a lot of business owners, but the strategic planning for business owners, like I know a lot of people that have these business ideas or they want to start a business, and they do, and they start the business and it's great, but they don't have a lot of the financial planning behind it. Right. I mean, because it takes a lot. You got to set up, systems and processes and accounting, and then you make the money, and where's the money going? So like, do you work with people from soup to nuts to sort of set all of that up? Or are you just working with them to take the money and figure out, what do I do with all of my net proceeds and that sort of thing?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. So I typically am a great fit for 7 and 8 figure female entrepreneurs. I did try to work with multi 6-figure entrepreneurs, but I found that they're still in this place of trying to figure out their systems and processes and invest in their company. And when you're in that phase, it is really like you're doing a lot of trial and error. Once you're getting into 7 and 8 figures, it's more like now you're dealing with tax bills and how do I manage these? And in almost every single case, these women are making more money than they've ever made before for the first time. And that's a paralyzing feeling because a lot of them didn't come from money. And if you don't come from money, you typically don't have the network to support you preserving that wealth and growing that wealth. And women even less so, because men tend to naturally talk about money and deals and find themselves in conversations that have more elevated advice. women still don't. A lot of the advice that's given to female business owners is on the softer skills or on manifesting. And it always ends up going to the softer stuff. And it's like the hard hitting stuff is really important. And especially if you're building a company to sell, they'll eat you alive at the deal table. So you really need to be prepared and surround yourself with the right team. Now, having said that, there are stages of business. And one thing I explain to women is when you're first getting started, I think you're not really sure where it's going to go, but eventually you start to figure out, am I running a lifestyle business or am I running an enterprise business? And by lifestyle business, I mean, the business generates money that allows you to fund your lifestyle and also build your financial independence away from the company. If you're running an enterprise company, you're going to build that company to sell it. And it's really important for you to optimize the value of that company. Of course, it's helpful if you are disciplined and responsible and save along the way. It puts less pressure on the value that you have to get for that company, but your priorities are slightly different. If you're a lifestyle business, then you really want to be maximizing the amount of money that you can take from that business as an owner. So for example, maximizing a solo 401k or SEP IRA. Your company is such a powerful vehicle to do that because for an employee, they can only put away $20,500 a year and maybe get an employer match. If you're a business owner, you could potentially be putting away up to $61,000, $62,000 a year into a solo 401k or a SEP. So it's like you have these supercharged retirement vehicles, and then the sky is the limit for how much money you want to make. But you really need context for, like, you're not just saving money for the sake of saving money. You need to understand, like, what are the goals that I'm trying to hit and why am I trying to hit them? And so that's where I come in and quantify for you. Okay, if you want to retire in 15 years and spend $500,000 a year, this is how much you need to be saving. And then from there, we figure out what's the most tax efficient way to do that. And that's when I start working with CPAs, CFOs to make sure that all of that is integrating. But it's an ongoing process.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's such a detailed one, right? But I love that it really just all goes back to your goal, right? Everybody's goal is different, right? Not everybody wants to build a business to sell it for, down the line. Some people just want to have this business to sustain their lifestyle and eventually retire on it and that sort of thing. So it really is interesting, but it all goes back to knowing what you want, right? You have to know what you want before you can ask for it. So it's so important to know what you want and set those goals to work towards it. So, okay. So tell us about the habits of the uber wealthy, because obviously you've worked with clients that are, billion-dollar clients, private wealth management. Give us some tips for the habits of the uber wealthy.
So one thing that you said at the beginning caught my attention, which was, you know how to make money and you know how to spend money. The difference with wealthy people is that they know how to make money.
Make money, make money.
Yes.
Yeah. So they're not spending their money. I mean, why make it?
Wealthy people are extremely good at living below their means. So it's funny because once you get into wealth management, you think like, professional athletes or celebrities would be great and cool people to have as clients. Actually, a lot of people don't end up pursuing those people because they don't know how to manage their money. Yeah. True wealthy people, wealth that goes on for generations, they really understand the relationship between the sustainability of money. And so they do live below their means. And, obviously, if you have a lot of money, you're not going to be living poorly, but they understand that. I'll use an example. So I sometimes when I do talks, I talk about how wealthy people have money machines. And so if you have a money machine that's worth $100,000, you can pull about $4,000 a year out of that money machine. If you have a money machine that's $1 million, you can pull $40,000 a year out of that money machine. If you have a $10 million money machine, you can pull $400,000 a year out of it. So if you only live off of $250,000 and you have a $10 million money machine, So you're pulling $400,000 out and you only need to live off of $250,000. That portfolio will sustain itself and it will continue to grow, particularly if you're living below that $400,000. And they understand that because I don't know if you've ever heard the quote from Einstein, but he said compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. Those who understand it earn it, and those who don't pay it. So what he means by that is those who understand it, they invest. They don't see saving as a deprivation event. They see it as an investment. Those who don't understand it carry credit card debt, and they're the ones that pay the compound interest. So understanding interest is super important because you can use it to your extreme advantage or you can be ruined by it. And a lot of it comes down to the fact that knowledge is power. So for me, I grew up in a household that was fairly financially stressed, and there wasn't a ton of financial acumen going on in my household. So when I grew up, I knew that I wanted to learn all the tips and tricks to saving money, making money work for me, tax strategies, all that kind of stuff. And a lot of it does come down to at first, it comes down to your personal willingness to get educated. And then once you get to a certain point, you can hire a team around you to do that stuff for you. So hiring a good CPA, hiring a good estate planner, hiring a good insurance agent. And of course, first thing you should do is hire a good financial planner.
Of course.
Yes. Because the financial planner is going to give you the roadmap over your whole life. And so then once you have the roadmap, then you can start implementing the steps necessary.
So here's the questions for people that are listening that may not have a financial planner right now. They may be thinking, and I don't know if it's specifically with you, because I know you work with, 7 and 8 figure entrepreneurs, but like, if they're listening and they're like, well, I don't have enough money, quote unquote, to invest or enough money to have a financial planner. Is there like a place, where it's like, if you have this much money saved, you should have a financial planner to work with. You know what I mean? Or I'm just curious, like, what's the threshold there?
Mm-hmm. That's another great question. So fortunately, now that the industry has migrated from this like brokerage, just selling you stocks into more holistic planning, there are advisors out there that do one-time financial plans. And I would highly recommend that people do that.
Oh,
it can range anywhere from $1,500 to $10,000 to $20,000. Obviously, if you're on the lower end of the spectrum, paying between $1,500 and $2,500 for a financial plan is probably where you're going to end up. But it's highly worth it because it gives you context for those numbers that you need to start to familiarize yourself with. And especially if you are an entrepreneur, it's really important to have that in the back of your head because you're setting goals to reach for. And if you don't have those goals to reach for, it's kind of like, I think it was Yogi Berra that said, if you don't know where you're going, you might end up someplace else.
Yeah.
And so personally, you want to have those goals so you can utilize your business to help you achieve those. It doesn't mean you have to achieve them today. There are going to be small steps that you take along the way, but just having those goals, it's amazing what a difference that makes.
Absolutely. Okay. And then, so any other habits that wealthy people do besides, obviously they're conservative with their money, right? They're not spending more than what their assets are making and that sort of thing. So they're constantly building wealth, looking for other investments. Anything else that we should know?
So diversification, they say, is the only free lunch in investing. So it's very important to be diversified. And so I'm using business owners as an example, just because that's who I work with. Yeah. But if you are a business owner, that's why it's so great to utilize your business to save into vehicles like a 401k or a Roth, because what you're doing is you're now diversifying because your small business is considered a private business. Then once you set up those accounts, you're going to be investing in public businesses. And then if you buy a house, now you're going to have some real estate. So when you look at your overall portfolio, it's starting to diversify. And when we get into climates like this, where there's a war in Ukraine, we have 8% inflation, not everything is going to go up at the same time. So the more diversified you are, the better off you'll be making it through these different climates. And that goes for both investments and tax diversification. So there are 3 different types of accounts that you can have. You can have a tax-free account, which would be like a Roth IRA. I highly recommend funding that while you're in a lower tax bracket because there is an income phase out. So a Roth IRA, you put after-tax money in, but then it grows tax-free for the rest of your life. So if you're younger and you're in a tax bracket, that's a super powerful compound interest vehicle. Then you have tax-deferred accounts, which are like your retirement accounts. So you put that money in before it gets taxed. It grows tax deferred, meaning it doesn't get taxed for the whole time that it's in there. And then when you take it out is when you pay taxes. And then the third bucket is a taxable account. So that's after-tax money. That's just like your normal investment account. The earnings on that get taxed every year. So it grows at a slower pace, but you can access it anytime. So wealthy people have incredible diversification. They have private investments, they have public investments, they have real estate, they have cash, and then they also have tax diversification. So they have the tax-free, tax-deferred, and taxable buckets. And those diversification is like the key to making sure that you can survive through any geopolitical climate, any inflationary climate. That kind of stuff is really important.
Yeah, that's great. That's amazing advice in this like short little podcast. I feel like I just learned a lot. And then like, I really do. So, and then, okay. So we talking about just what's going on, in the world right now with inflation and like interest rates. So interest rates have been so great for so long. Like, what are your thoughts on that? You think, are we in for it? Are they going to start rising again? You think they're going to stay? Like, what is your quick opinion on that?
Ooh, okay. So making a prediction on rates is a losing game because we never know.
Exactly.
We have been spoiled by low rates for a really long time. I think I'm a millennial. I think I have more of an appreciation for it than most millennials just because I have studied the history of interest rates. Money's essentially been free for a really, really long time. Now, that's not necessarily the greatest thing. We've been in an artificially low interest rate environment pretty much since the recession. Yeah. And so ultimately, it would be a good thing to start to make rates go higher because bonds essentially get nothing in terms of yield. So, and just high level. So when you're investing, there's stocks and there's bonds. Stocks are like investing in ownership of a company. Bonds are like loans. So when you buy a bond, especially the US government is the biggest lender of bonds in our country, you haven't been able to really get a yield. Just like if you have a mortgage, you haven't really had to pay much of a yield. You have maybe like a 3% interest rate on your mortgage. That's not great for investors, particularly retirees, because they're not getting a lot of yield on that safer asset. So they've had to spend more time in the market, which can be a more volatile asset. So ultimately, it would be a good thing if we got to a healthier environment where interest rates did go up closer to 4, 5, 6%. But getting there will be a painful process. Yeah. So long-term and ultimately it would be a good thing. It's just getting there is going to feel rocky. And I mean, if we don't get there, then it is great that you have a mortgage with a low interest rate. That's been a huge savings for a lot of people, the fact that they've been able to get these 30-year mortgages. And by the way, having a 30-year mortgage in an inflationary environment is amazing because the purchasing power of your dollar is going down, prices are going up, but your mortgage is staying the same. Yeah. So I always tell people, for some reason, a lot of female entrepreneurs, once they become successful, they want to buy their houses in cash. And I'm like, do not do that because we've been in such a generous interest rate environment for mortgages. You can essentially, and that's one thing that wealthy people are phenomenal at, is they use other people's money whenever they can. Because why would they use their own money when they can keep it in the market, making 8, 9, 10%? They can borrow someone else's money and only pay 2 or 3% to borrow that. That's what we call an interest rate arbitrage. So if you're making 8% in the market and you're paying 3% to borrow money, that's an interest rate arbitrage of 5%. And wealthy people are amazing at finding interest rate arbitrage opportunities.
Interesting. I love it. That is such amazing advice. Okay. So I feel like I'm chock full of information on this episode. Let's talk a little bit about your spiritual side, because I mentioned that in the bio, and I love it because I feel like I'm very much the same, always seeking to understand why we're here and find that connection between us human beings. So let's talk a little bit about what you do to sort of fuel your soul and feed your soul with your personal development. You're a mom, you're a wife, you're an entrepreneur starting a business. What do you do for your personal development? How do you, fuel your spirit?
So I really like to read about spiritual development and personal development. And I have, of course, like the Gaia app. And if I were to just default to my interests, it would be, at least outside of work, it would be that. Like I love reading about, it's funny because I grew up Irish Catholic, and my mom read a book my junior year in college called Many Lives, Many Masters by Dr. Brian Weiss. And that was about reincarnation. And she gave it to me and I was like, you're crazy. Like, this is so crazy. And then I read the book. I read the book and then I actually remembered an experience that I had when I was 5. And I remember I was sitting in the front seat, which I'm not even sure if you were allowed to do, but it was the 90s. So
oh yeah, of course you were.
I was sitting in the front seat and I looked in the mirror, and like that side mirror out the window, and I was looking at myself and I was just like, well, I guess this is who I am this time around, and just had a very nonchalant thought, like I was settling into my body, and I was sort of okay with it. I was like accepting it, but I had completely forgotten about that experience until I read that book. And that really got me thinking about just how we get so embedded in the way that we grow up, and particularly with religion. And yeah, that kind of sent me on a whole spiritual journey. I read Autobiography of a Yogi. I read a lot of Eckhart Tolle. I just started Byron Katie's book. So, and honestly, I was really glad that I found those resources and outlets, because they really helped me get through the sexual harassment experiences, because that was my first time living so far away from my family. And my husband was on the road 15 days a month, and I was alone a lot, dealing with the most traumatic situation I had ever been through. And finding those, I was almost like forced to find those inner resources.
Yeah.
And I do wish, looking back, that I had made more time for things like meditation, because I do believe everything happens for a reason, but I also think it would have given me clarity to listen to myself and how uncomfortable I was in certain situations if I had given myself the space. And I didn't really do that. I jumped from burning platform to burning platform just on a conscious level. And since then, I've learned that I think 95% is subconscious. And so I needed to learn to start to pay attention to that. And I won't say I have it all figured out, but it certainly helped.
Yeah, no, geez, none of us have it all figured out, but I love that. And I wonder, as you were talking, I was thinking, I wonder if it was the 90s and the time that we were living because I don't think, meditation, spirituality, I know like people were doing yoga, and maybe it's just the age that I was, right? I mean, the 90s, I was late teenager, early 20s, but I just feel like you said, like giving myself that space wasn't really an option then. But I agree with you. I think, and I talk about this all the time, about the power of meditation, and meditation meaning very different things for different people. But the core of meditation is quieting your mind and being with yourself and being with those thoughts and allowing yourself to kind of go there and go within and let whatever downloads come to you, because it's in those moments that, we become our creative selves, but we also get to know ourselves the most, and it's when whatever you want to call it, for whatever religion you are, but God, the universe, speaks to us in those quiet times and in those moments. And there's so much growth there if we are able to allow ourselves to or give ourselves the permission to have those quiet times in and amongst our crazy world. But I'm so thrilled that you shared those book titles with us, because I have never read Many Lives, Many Masters, but I am going to read it because it sounds very interesting. And I have read, I'm trying to remember the name of a book, but it was a neurosurgeon wrote the book. This is terrible. I'll have to put it in the show notes when I remember it. But it was a neurosurgeon that wrote about experiencing a near-death experience, like they call it like an NDE, and how he had all these patients throughout his life who had experienced NDEs, and he always attributed it to science, to the medical component, until he was in a coma for like 10 days. And then when he woke up, he wrote this book, and I can't believe I can't remember the name of it. It's so good, but it's just the power of the spirit, and how powerful this book was, that he wrote this into, he remembered the entire time being under, and his whole near-death experience. And when he woke up, he realized it can't be science. I'm a scientist, I'm a doctor. He's like, it can't be. It only has to be what's happened. So I too love books about spirituality. And
I feel like I might have read that one. I don't know if it has like angel in the title.
Yes, it does. It does.
Yeah,
it's in my library on my Kindle. So I apologize, listeners, that I can't think of it, but I promise I will put it in the show notes for this episode, along with the other books that Kaitlyn recommended. So,
the other one that I actually refer to quite often because it's so simple is The Four Agreements. That was a big one for me too.
Best. That was actually one of the first books that I read from a personal development, spirituality standpoint. Actually, that's not true. I think I read a lot of them, but I think one of the first ones in my adult life that really impacted me. Mm-hmm. It's an amazing book. Yes.
I love the agreement about not taking anything personally, because what people say is a reflection of themselves, and how powerful that's been in my life. And also just how powerful, like meditation. I wanted to have a natural birth with my son, and I did hypnobirthing classes, and I did end up having a natural birth, and it was so incredibly empowering. But I went to a very quiet space through an incredibly intense time. And it's amazing how I felt like I could do anything after that experience. I said to my husband, I felt like a mind ninja, because having that amount of control, I don't know if control is the right word, but composure.
Yeah.
And training myself to be able to handle something like that through going quiet. It was such a powerful juxtaposition of quietness and yet like such intensity, and like the strength that can come from that, which is funny because in this world of doers, it's like you think strength is going to the gym or doing the reps, doing work. And it's actually allowing. And I described that to my husband. I was like, I actually didn't do anything. I just allowed my body to do the work. And it was incredible.
That is incredible. And I think in a way it is control, in the sense that, I mean, the control that you are having is knowing that you're kind of not in control. But that you are allowing, and that you are controlling the thoughts, because you're not letting things negative thoughts come in. The what ifs, what if this happens? What if that happens? I'm not sure. Am I going to need medicine? I'm not in the hospital. I mean, I don't know if you're in the hospital or not, but you know what I'm saying? Like all the things that could come up that could be worrisome, you controlled that, right? You controlled that space and allowed it just to happen. And I think it just speaks to how incredible our mind is, and how powerful it is if we tap into it and allow it. Mm-hmm. I love it. As a mindset coach, I'm going to end it on that one, because it's so phenomenal. So, Kaitlyn, thank you so much for joining me today. I really loved our conversation. I actually love that it was like all over the place, that we talked about hardcore financials and wealth management, and like, let's really build our wealth as women. And then we got into the spiritual side of things, because you know what? It all ties together, right?
Yes, it does. It absolutely does.
So thank you so much for being here. Tell my listeners how they can find you on social.
Sure. So I actually made a decision to get off of social, but I'm very accessible. My website is theoryplanning.com.
Awesome.
And you can always book a call with me there. There's a link. You can also find me on LinkedIn at Kaitlyn Carlson. And my email address is kaitlyn.carlson@theoryplanning.com. So feel free to drop me a note if you'd ever like to speak.
So great. Thank you so much. Guys, we will link all those in the show notes as well. I want to thank you all for joining us today and hearing this really amazing conversation with Kaitlyn. And as always, we'll be back next week with another amazing suburban warrior to share her story with you. Until then, have an awesome week, everybody.